Clark couldn't resist. He put the suit on. He looks down at the suit. Fits perfectly. Hello, folks. Welcome to Fantropolis, a place where we're going to rewrite Man of Steel. But before we do, we just have to show appreciation and the love to Zack Snyder for giving us his version of Superman on the big screen. I just wanted to express my take on Superman, my version of Superman. Because when it comes down to it, I'm a fan of Superman. Always have been. You know, kids in school used to ridicule me because I preferred Superman over Batman. Thought he was cooler. First, before we can actually rewrite Superman, we have to rewrite Clark Kent and tell of his real first obstacle in life. That bully, Pete Ross. Pete made Clark's life a living heck every single day at school. Pete was jealous over what Clark had. His family life, people liked him the kids liked him at school. It's not like Clark couldn't take him. When Clark was 5, he bench pressed his dad's tractor. Because if you know the story of Superman, you know he's an alien. And he has all these powers, but he hasn't discovered them all at once, just the super strength. And that was enough to get his parents' attention. And John, his dad, kept on telling him, you have to be the bigger man. Because in all actuality, Clark could kill this kid. The hard part is not. One day Pete crossed the line, though, and he poured a bucket of slop right on Clark, right in front of his classmates. Everyone laughed. He ran home smelly. He was angry. He wanted to knock out Pete Ross so bad. So John, his dad, uses a little bit of reverse psychology on him. He goes, all right, son, if that's what you feel you have to do. And this is where he really calls his bluff. He teaches him a fighting stance. If you're going to hit him, man, make sure you hit him good once. And he'll be done. And he knows Clark. He raised him well. Because Clark knows the consequences of what will happen. And he also remembers the lesson his dad gave him. You give me a man that resorts to violence, and I'll give you a man that's run out of good ideas. So the next day he goes right up to Pete. He goes, let's settle this. Just us. No one else. Pete agrees, and they set a location. Now there's this huge hill that overviews Smallville. You can see everything, and it's the perfect place to fight. So when Clark gets there, he looks at Pete and goes, I heard about your parents divorcing. I'm sorry. And Pete just starts to wail on Clark. Of course, Clark, he starts to kind of block himself until Pete's exhausted. And he starts to cry. He hit a nerve. So Clark sits there with him for 2 hours and they talk. And they become friends. Next day at school, everyone's talking about this fight. You know, who won? They just say they settled it. It was a draw. You know, kind of doing the Apollo Rocky thing. But they over embellish the fight. Let's just say that, just to make themselves both look good. So they have all these kids' attention on this bus. And the driver doesn't realize that a deer comes up in front of the road. He turns. The bus plummets into the water. Of course, Clark saves everyone in front of everyone. This becomes the thing to talk about. To the point where a town meeting is called with the Kents as a center point. They come clean and say, yeah, we don't know where our son came from. He came from a pod from outer space. It's kind of hard to believe, but what else is hard to believe is a kid lifting an entire bus. Now, if it's one thing if the kids said this, but the driver said it too. And Clark gave the demonstration, and he just bench presses this huge bench. Wow. So a guy steps up and he goes, Smallville's going to turn into Area 51. They're going to take him. All the kids, led by Pete Ross, surround the Kents. Pete goes, no one's taking him anywhere. He's our friend. The parents are just grateful to Clark for saving their kids. We're in his debt. His secret's safe with us. They join the kids. Postal workers, the firemen, police chief. They all said the same thing about Clark. He's always been a nice, polite young man. We're in. They joined the circle. There was only one left. Old Man Hurley. You can call this guy the OG of Smallville. I mean, he's been planting since before the Reagan administration. He's got bad knees, so he walks with a cane. He stands up and looks at Clark and goes, I resent the idiotic Kents for bringing this boy in. He's doomed us all. Clark gets at a whole new level of anger. His eyes, for the first time, light red. You don't talk about his parents that way. Old Man Hurley sees this, takes a deep breath and goes, I'm too old for this. I'm not saying nothing. And he walks out. So a pact was made. This wouldn't be something that would be talked about. It wouldn't leave the boundaries of Smallville. After this day, Clark and Pete would become inseparable. Clark would keep Pete out of trouble, and Pete would be the bad influence Clark needed at times. Like the time he convinced him, hey, let's climb your dad's barn. It was fun until Clark fell. Now, we're seeing this from Pete's point of view. He's like, Clark! Clark! Clark floats up. This is the first time he discovered he can fly. Pete's like, dude, are you okay? And Clark is like, yeah, I'm good. And Clark confesses to his dad. He goes, because John always taught him to always tell the truth. And John was more concerned about the flying part. He's like, I'm glad you're okay, but I think it's time I showed you the pod. So he shows him the pod he came down in. And Clark's first reaction to this is putting his hand on it. And he hasn't been around this pod since he was a baby. But he feels he knows this machine so well. He puts his hand on it and he gets visions of Antarctica. Like he has to go there. He confessed to his dad what he just saw. He's not ready to leave Smallville yet. He's not ready to pursue this. John says, when you're ready, I'm going to go with you. Years fly by, and Pete actually is starting to do well. He got a job at IHOP, and he's being considered for the manager position. And we think he's going to get it. IHOP. Now, Clark, he can't go out for any sports. So what he did was he stuck to other things like writing and reading, and in his spare time in between school and farming, he would volunteer at a firehouse. And considering fire didn't hurt him, he was perfect at it. And the guys at the firehouse, they got along with him so well. Because they knew that he couldn't be hurt. But Clark wasn't the type of guy that would actually soak up glory. Like, as far as he's concerned, he was one of the boys. But he started thinking of the pod and the Antarctica flashbacks. He said he's ready. And John backed up his word. He says, I'm going with you. And on the way to the Canadian border, they end up stopping at this truck stop. And they see this waitress getting harassed by this trucker. And Clark, a fully grown man now, tries to intervene. But it's John that beats him to it. He goes up to the trucker and he says, "Hey, I'm a farmer. I'm fully aware of the truckers union. And I have some of the office members on speed dial." Because, like I said, farming, you know. He goes, "You guys get really good benefits. I would hate for you to get fired over a stupid decision that you're making right now." The trucker backs down and gives the waitress a huge tip and apologizes for his rudeness. So John Kent just won a fight without throwing one punch. This is something Clark remembered. So they get to Antarctica, and Clark says, "Right here." John goes, "There's nothing for miles." And Clark knows. Like he's been here before, even though he hasn't. He puts his hand on the ground, and all around them, like these crystals start surrounding them, and it's the Fortress of Solitude. You see, 2 pods were sent to Earth. Clark and this information, this advanced technology information, call it pod, but it's every single thing you need to know about Krypton. And we see this hologram. Man says he's Jor-El. He's Clark's father. He tells Clark, "You are my son. You are Kal-El." And he explains every single thing that happened on Krypton. Now, I'm not going to talk about Krypton here because I'm going to do an entirely different video on that amazing planet. So just hit the like. So make sure you hit the like, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss that video. Clark is shocked. Here he is next to his Earth dad, who's physically there, and his real dad, who's a hologram. What a dynamic. Then Jor-El shows him the suits. All these suits come out. And he sees this gray one. It's next to this black one no one's really paying attention to. But and this entire fortress is linked to his mind. Like, he can make anything happen here. He just thinks. He just thinks to himself, it would look better with, like, fireman colors. Red and yellows and the system reads his mind and it makes it happen. And that's where we get the colorful Superman suit. Clark couldn't resist. He put the suit on. He looks down at the suit. Fits perfectly. He goes, "What now?" And right at the same time, Jor-El and John said the same exact thing. It's all on you now. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. If you like our content, please hit the subscribe button, make a comment, and as always, follow the road sign.